My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Archir Galajerthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer. Welcome back to Divide and Conquer's another developer diary to show you all some of the changes since the last one, as there have been quite a few. So we'll just turn all of those little icons back on. So, start as we mean to go on. Campaign map first, then we'll jump over to the battle map. Not too many changes on the battle map, but there are one or two, and we can show those later on. So, first of all, of course, there are some region changes. Now, I have spoken about this recently in the Candish episodes, but of course I was pointing at things with my mouse cursor, which you'll note you cannot see because Nvidia is still bugged annoyingly, and I've tried recording on other software and it is just garbage in comparison to the quality Nvidia gives me, so you're going to have to put up with the no cursor. But you will note Henneth and Noon has gone, and in its place there now stands a fort which bears the same battle map and the same campaign strategy map model, but is no longer an actual city. So now the defence for Gondor lies on the Anduin itself, the crossing points for Mordor being Osgiliath, Caer Andros, and further north at the Falls of Rauros. So it's a lot easier to defend if you're playing as Gondor, but it also does now mean that you're defending straight from the off. But that is what we would rather have. And I saw there was argument to suggest that the gamble of having Henneth and Noon as a province and as a region is kind of for each player to decide if they want to take that gamble. Do they want to try and fight there, knowing that gives them 3 places to defend, or do they want to just let Mordor have this very useful recruitment centre? That was suggested as a reason why we should have kept it. But personally, the main reason Henneth and Noon is gone is because it used to annoy me absolutely no end that this thing, which should just be a cave, was in fact excuse me, sorry, a citadel on the game map. So it was as useful, if not more so, than Minas Tirith. And it's a cave that no one lives in. So that really used to annoy me. So it's gone. So that's one of the changes. Now, I'll deal with the changes to Gondor before we deal with where the regions have gone, because in removing Henneth and Noon, some changes have had to come to Gondor. Chief amongst these is that when the AI controls Gondor, they now get Western and Eastern Osgiliath in the Turn 1 Auto expansion, whereas as a human player, which you can see we are currently playing as a human player, you only get West, but the AI will get East. Caer Andros now has a bigger garrison than it had before in order to compensate for, obviously, the loss of Henneth and Noon, because Caer Andros was actually a really rubbish, had a really awful garrison. Faramir now sits within Caer Andros, but he has Ithilien Rangers as his bodyguard. Bordir, who now resides in Henneth and Noon, also has Ithilien Rangers as his bodyguard, so you've got a couple of Ithilien Ranger bodyguards now. In order also, with the loss of Henneth and Noon, Calenhad has been bumped up to be a castle. It's no longer a keep, and Carasast is now a large town rather than a town. So you get a little bit more of a boost from your nearest towns to the front line, which helps you a little bit. You will know, of course, Bordir also has an Ithilien Ranger UI image now, so that he matches that, which is good. So, the Henneth and Noon region, this Gobadrine had a bit of a border change, and you'll also note Caer Andros now actually comes onto this side of Ithilien, so that it can now have a port, and also just give Gondor a little bit more. It just seemed nicer for Caer Andros to actually encompass a bit more of that land, so you can put watchtowers there and things like that, and you can also then move out to the bridges, or that bridge, for example, if they're coming from the south, and you don't have to trespass to do it. So that is the change there. The region of Henneth and Noon has gone to become the Westfold, and there it is. So I will try my very best not to point at things with my mouse without clicking, so that you can actually see, but this is the Westfold here. Ginyard is now the town name. West Emnet has been shrunk slightly to accommodate, and Onodrith has moved just to there. And over in the east Emnet is now, the town is now called Entwade. I didn't like the town name of Dunlustir. I didn't think it was particularly Rohirric, and also I couldn't see that it was a proper town name or anything like that. Whereas Entwade I've seen on a map before, and Onodrith is another name, or not Onodrith itself, but Onodlo. This river, the Entwash, is also called the Onodlo River, and Onodrith is a mixing of Onodlo and Tirith, which means like River Guardian or Onodlo River Guardian. That's the name of the town, so it just fit a bit better. You'll also note that Edoras has been increased its region borders. I can zoom in, you can just see it there. So Edoras's border used to be this, is it called Silver something, isn't it? Snowbourne, sorry. So the river used to be the border, and then the King's Land used to just be this tiny little bit here. But now the King's Land encompasses a lot more land. I always think it's better to have bigger provinces where possible, save for places like the Hornburg, which has now been reduced to just be Helm's Deep. Now, the main purpose of this is that previously Isengard had a sort of highway to Edoras. So they'd take Foldberg, they'd take the Hornburg, and then they'd scoop straight in and they'd hit Edoras. But now they can take Foldberg and the Hornburg, and they still don't border Edoras yet. They've got to go through the Westfold to do it. Now, they might go for the Westfold first, but then that leaves Hornburg and Edoras unconnected again. And I just preferred that. So the Hornburg doesn't have this long sort of strip down here anymore, and it's now just Helm's Deep itself. Foldberg now occupies the properly named region, the Gap of Rohan. Recently, this used to be called the Gap of Rohan, and that's just wrong. This is the Gap, like this bit here where that village is. That is the literal Gap of Rohan. So this region is now called that to reflect, and this is now called the Fords of Eisen, because this is the again, I'm pointing at things you can't see. This river down here is called the Eisen River, hence the reason that village is called Eisen Run. And this river here is the Entwash, by the way, the Anodlo. So Isengard get Eisen Run in the turn 1 rather than Ginyard or anything like that. Further region changes around this area, of course, Tharbad. So Tharbad, the Swan Fleet as it's now named, is now a single town, and it will have a new battle map in the future to reflect the fact that it is a single location. The purpose of removing the 2 Tharbads and going down to 1 is because a lot of people, players, fans, I'm not included in this number, I have to say I'm a dissenting justice, to use English legal system, but Numinas and Fornost can be upgraded by the Northern Dunedain, Tharbad and Fornost can be upgraded by the Northern Dunedain, but Numinas could not. But with the reduction of Tharbad down to now a single province, it allows Numinas to be upgraded by the Northern Dunedain, and that is the plan. The region that was like this used to be called Royal Tharbad and is now called Tharbad, and the one on the other side of the river used to be called Tharbad. But that one has moved down to here and has become La Fieren, and the town name is Bail, or Bale, or Vale, I don't know, it's Gaelic, who knows how they pronounce that. But so it's moved to there, and you'll note quite nicely now there is a distinct and complete rebel separation between Enedwaith and Dunland. So they don't start bordered anymore, which doesn't make massive amounts of difference, but it does just slightly slow down their wars with each other. You'll also note in the turn 1 expansion, Dunland get Tharbad, so they're across the river straight away. They don't have to wait and get through it. There's also been the addition, the forest lands in southern Dunland here have been extended down into Fortrue and into Herotshire, and there's a river now that runs through the middle with a crossing point. Where's a crossing point?
Captain of Gondor.
With the crossing point being over there in Alkford, or all the way around through Dunland. So there's no direct border now between Herot and Bregnas. You have to go through one of the side regions in order to get from Bregnas to Herot, which is just a little bit of a map border change in this region. So the final region change and moving around and whatnot is, of course, the Shire. So the Shire is now broken down into Shire West, Shire North and Shire South, which is disappointing because, of course, there are 4 distinct farthings of the Shire, and now they are not represented. But then, in truth, there are 4 farthings, and then there's Buckland, so there would have been 5 towns to represent it properly. And given that the Shire is locked, it was a waste of resources. So the Shire East Farthing is gone, and the lands have been shared between South and North. And as I said, Sackville has moved. It was sort of near where that farmstead was, which is the one to the left of the box that's popping up, but it has of course now moved and has been renamed to Longbottom, and really quite nicely in a total lucky, like, was not planned at all. I moved the town to there using a program, a third-party program, not by getting the cursor stat in-game, and I had no idea that the orchard was there, but they blend so nicely together. I think it almost looks intended. I really like it. So Longbottom now sits on that road there. And because Longbottom is a name I could find, whereas Sackville I think is a conjecture, or indeed if Sackville is a place, I couldn't find where it actually was, whereas I found maps with Longbottom on, so it just seemed to fit better. It also separates the Shire a bit more, so that when people raid the Shire, like something that I used to frequently do, it's no longer like one day between each of the villages. You now actually got to walk to get to the capitals of each point. But with the loss of a very profitable region for the Breland, Mitchell Delving is now able to upgrade, and so is Undertowers. The only 2 locked towns now in the entire game are Hobbiton and Longbottom. So these two can never upgrade, no matter who owns them, which is a sort of risk-reward thing, because they give you loads of money, but they don't really train any of your troops. They're very useful for Bree, who get almost all of their troops at village level, but for other nations, these places will just be little banks that don't give you any troops and are hard to defend, but they're worth a lot of money. And so it's a nice little... It's a sort of gamble, if you will. If you can hold them, definitely try and get them, but don't ever think of holding the line in the Shire, because you just won't be able to. But you may note, I'm hoping you'll note, because I was really pleased with it. Previously, the Far Downs, which are the ones over here, which are the ones here along this sort of line, those were the Far Downs, and then these ones here were the White Downs. And they were just two arcs. They were like two lines of hills, like very similar to the mountain line there, where it's one distinct line. There aren't like offshoots coming off of it. And so instead I made the whole general area is now just hilly in general. And so it just looks better given that area is a well-known hilly region with two sets of downs merging together. So just a little bit of map editing there. The province that was Deep Hallow, where Alf still stands, because I thought we'd keep Alf in so that you've got a Hobbit general who's free to roam about and do what you like with. And it didn't really harm Bree in any way to have a general who wasn't free upkeep. But the region has moved to here, and it's now called Scather's Gap, and the town is called Yulston. And you'll note it gives Gundabad and Anduin just a little bit of a bumper between them. Now, some people have said, but hang on, this is a really remote part of the map where no one will ever fight over. And I don't really take that argument when we're talking about somewhere that's bordering quite a few regions. But also because the purpose of this region is because Gundabad and the Anduin border each other straight away, as you can see from the Turn 1 auto expansion. And they fight almost immediately from like turn 1. The Anduin just has no hope of surviving against this onslaught from Gundabad when Moria starts getting into gear and coming down from the mountains, and when Dol Guldur gets stronger. And by giving just that one rebel province that they might waste some troops on, it gives Gundabad just something else to focus on, while Anduin just gets 5 or 10 turns to prepare and train some troops before they are attacked in 3 locations at turn 1. So that is why it was added to there. And interestingly, it has a unique strategy map model, which I don't know where that actually is from, but I thought I'd keep it because I like the fact that it looks really quaint and dainty. But anyway, there we are. So that's where the region went, Scather's Gap. You will note that it does cross over the mountains, and you can see it better on the map there. So no longer does High Pass go all the way up and border Gundabad. Scather's Gap now covers that section in the centre. The gap it's referring to is that one across the top there, where the borders of the two regions meet, and not a gap through the Misty Mountains. It's the gap between the Grey and the Misty. So that's where that new region has moved to. That is not a restricted region, as I say. Only the Shire are restricted now. Other small minor map changes. Zag-Kala, the region of. The battle map for Zag-Kala has been given a wooden gate, because apparently the AI, as RK has discovered through copious amounts of testing, the AI cannot sally out of a settlement that does not have a gate, which is a really bizarre twist, but it's nice that we're learning this now. So Zag-Kala has been given a gate so that the AI actually sallies out. And also the battle map for Zag-Kala now uses the climate of Moria, which won't mean much on the campaign map, but on the battle map it means that it has a darker sort of tone and texture to the actual floor of the battle map, and indeed the weather settings, all things like that. So it will feel darker and more goblin-y when you actually fight on it. Something I can't really show you, but just to explain, most of the AI garrisons around the map, I think I've mentioned this before, but whatever, I'll say it again. Most of the AI garrisons dotted around the map have been tweaked. Some have been made larger, but most have been made smaller. So you will find now when you attack key locations, like Bree, Deadman's Dyke, and Numinas, Imladris, Mithlond, etc., you will find there are less free garrison troops given to the AI, so it's a little bit easier to take them. Previously, some of these places were just almost impossible to take because, of course, as I'm sure many of you are well aware, the AI cannot factor in the garrison troops. It will look at Keras Galathon, for example, see 3 units and think, right, there's 3 units in there. I know what their strengths and skills are. I will take 7 units that will definitely beat them in the auto-resolve, given that I know what the auto-resolve is going to be because I am the computer. But then they attack it and boom, suddenly 5 more units appear and the army that they've created then is not strong enough to take it. And that happens over and over and over and over again because the AI does sort of go on a minimum calculation of how small can my army be to take the town, and that's what I will use. It doesn't go for just overwhelming numbers in order to cut down its losses. And it does create a problem where the garrison script causes some towns to just be invincible because the AI never takes enough troops. So some of them have been reduced to kind of combat that, and in other places they have been increased. For example, the town of Ströndost over here in Dorwinion, the mountains of Dorwinion, has been given a garrison for the human player as well, so that it is just a bit more easily defended, because it is one of your 3 heartland provinces as Dorwinion. But whilst we're on the subject of Dorwinion and moving away from garrisons, Dorwinion now does not have a debuff training in mountains. And this is specifically because they start with a province that is mountains, and they train really slowly in mountains, so Ströndost was totally useless to them. So to combat that, they now are able to train in mountains, grassland and forest. So basically Dorwinion, the only place you don't want to be training troops as Dorwinion is Desert Land, which is basically the whole south of the map, which will be renamed, as I say, to Barren Land. So it will eventually encompass places like Dor Norhak, Dol Guldur, most of Moria. That rework has not yet come in, but it will in time. And that will... The change to Barren will give It will actually make it more of a thing that your troops can't train very well in a certain region. So at the moment, most of the world trains really slowly in desert land, and this is to reflect the fact that people don't like living there. So there aren't very many people, you can't train as many troops, there we are. But desert, of course, as I've already said, is only really everything south of the Harnan. So all of these things over here, this is desert, and it ends sort of there. I think Steppes of the Wain Riders is the last desert region. So for most factions, it meant absolutely nothing, which is why it's an absolute waste of a resource. So instead, by changing it to barren and applying it to people that live in sort of desolated lands, it's kind of to try and reflect a nomadic style of existence. So like orcs, Harad, Rune, Cant, people like that, people that don't really live in fixed locations and they are constantly on the move. That's what desert is going to reflect. It's a nomadic existence, but nomad can't be a type of terrain, but that's the general thinking behind it. People that like living in forests, of course, that's easy to explain. Same with mountains, same with grassland. But no one would like to live in barren places, but the point of it is that barren places are easier for nomads to move through, and that's the point of it. So that I'm not sure if any other nations will get the Baron thing. I don't know if many of the ones in the north will. Perhaps Enedwyth and Dunland maybe, but the problem is, of course, Baron, even moving it out of deserts, is still heavily restricted to the southeast of the map. There aren't that many Baron, if you will, places outside of those areas, so it's a tricky one. And it may... at this time, no work has been done. This is all me basically brainstorming live for you, but... it may well actually just be scrapped altogether, and these regions will just be reclassified as grassland, and it will just be done away with entirely, and we'll save a hidden resource slot. I'm not sure yet. We've not really discussed it, but it's on the to-do. So another problem that we've been having and has now hopefully been fixed, so you should see overall the AI doing just a little bit better, only a slight improvement, but it should be, and that is that previously the AI was really struggling to build their culture improving buildings. So if we come back to Gondor, you should all know what these are. Things like the school, culture increase bonus 3%. The AI does not rate those very highly at all, and so unfortunately, they're in some places, particularly from our beta testers testing. Umbar, for example, one of our testers had played something like 100 turns, and Umbar had something like 15% King's Men culture, which is just abysmal. They held it for the entire game. How is it not improved in culture? So we've done a couple of things to make it easier. So tier 1 culture buildings are now cheaper, and they only take 2 turns instead of 3 to build, which helps the AI a bit. The AI gets a bonus to roads again, so you as a human player do not, but the AI does, so their roads will increase their culture for them, because they heavily favour roads, so that's a good way to get it back in. And also specifically to counter Umbar, but there's a unique building in Umbar called the Ruins of the Pillar, and that now gives a 2% culture conversion bonus for the Ardenaeum explicitly, just to help combat that. Speaking of map changes as well, in the last developer diary I mentioned that the regions of Arthedain, Cardolan and Rudar had been amended to reflect their accurate locations, but unfortunately this somewhat nerfed the Northern Dunedain a little too much, and so whilst Fenris-Druinen and Weather Hills are now part of Rudar, they're counted as Rudar, they are also counted as Cardolan, so that the Northern Dunedain can train their early tier units in both of these, because they start with both of these. So all three of these are now Cardland, so the Angle, the Lone Lands and the Weather Hills, they are counted as Cardland, but Ostsul and the Angle are also counted as Ruadau. And we can kind of explain it away because it was said that Amunsul was the kind of three-way point, the three-way division between Ruadau, Arthedain and Cardland, so sort of a split like that. Oh, you can't see again, can you? So it was just a three-way point, with Arthedain being up here on the left, Cardland being down here on the left, and Ruadau being up here on the right. So it's not too much of a stretch to say Ostsul is in Cardland. And of course, Fenestruinen also is supposed to mark the border of Ruadau, with Ruadau being the angle, the point of the angle where the rivers meet, being the most southerly point of Ruadau. It's not a stretch, therefore, to suggest that Cardlani peoples would come across the river and live in Fenestruinen. So I'm happy with that. I'm not too bothered. But it does mean as a Northern Dunedain, you get Cardland units where you did before. In this Northern Theatre, though, Angmar was unfortunately struggling a little too much for our liking, and so they have been given a couple of extra starting forces when the AI controls them. So if you're playing as the Northern Dunedain, you might find it a touch harder early on, because Angmar will throw a bit more at you than they previously did, which is good, I think. And also on the subject of Angmar, Litash now gets a pre-built garrison quarters, which is the barracks building. So Litash and Mount Graham and Carndom can all train troops for Angmar pretty much straight away. So they will just throw a bit more troops at you, which will be interesting when I start my High Elves campaign, because we're going to be going for Angmar. And they're going to be throwing more at us, which is annoying. But speaking of the High Elves, if they are controlled by the AI, so if you're playing as Moria or anyone around them, this is something to watch out for. They get an extra unit of Swordmasters and Archers in Imladris itself at the start of the game, and Gildor Inglorian, who for a human player starts in this section of woodland over here, he has been moved over to Imladris at the start of the game. I don't know what they've done with him or where they've moved him, but he gets moved over to this region in the second turn. Because when he was in the middle, unfortunately, he was just sort of walking backwards and forwards and he never went anywhere, so we just moved him over to Imladris. Also because Imladris at the moment, it's about 50-50 whether or not Moria take it quite early doors. We have improved the defences there to try and make it more like 75-25. But do be aware that Imladris may well fall for the AI, and when you're playing as sort of anyone else. They won't hold it forever now, which I actually think is a really good thing, because previously Imladris used to hold on for like 300 turns and not claim any towns. So it's nice to see it die, in a weird sort of way. Something that many people will probably dislike, and I was saving, is that Eladan and Elrahir have been given Dunedain bodyguards as their bodyguards. They do not come with cavalry anymore. Many of you are going to absolutely cry havoc and let loose your dogs of war because, as is often pointed out to me, Elrahir's name literally means horse lord, and so people will then be like, how can you have a horse lord who doesn't even ride a horse? But it has been taken that unfortunately the twins are so overwhelmingly overpowered with cavalry archers that they just ruin the game for the early tier. And because we've had them fighting for the Dunedain, that's the premise of the Imladris system, they've been off with the Dunedain and you go and call them back, it makes sense that they come back with Dunedain. And that is exactly what they do. So when they spawn, one of them in the Weather Hills, one of them in the Troll Shores, they each now have Dunedain Bodyguard as their bodyguard, and they come with a unit of Dunedain Cavalry Archers. So there are cavalry archers in there, but they're just not elven ones anymore, and they're not auto-replenishing. So feel free to post your comments and get your hate out of the way, but this has been tested by... We've taken on board a few new beta testers, and I'm very grateful to all of you that have come on board. You've already been very, very helpful. And we've taken the feedback from them, and it's a general consensus, really, that the twins were just overpowered. So they have lost their horse bodyguard. They will walk a bit slower now. So do... deal with that one. And the final change for Imladris then, or for the High Elves, Imladris now starts with a pre-built Teleri barracks, so you can get both types of forces in Imladris straight away. And the Town Hall in Mithlond has been reduced by 1 tier, just to try and quell the sort of wealth power that is the lands of Linden. So there we are. And finally, before we jump over to the battle map, then there have been a load more traits and ancillaries added as part of the large trait and ancillary overhaul by Rahur. And these ones, at the moment, the ones most recently added are the reason I've mentioned them is because guilds are going to start giving traits and ancillaries. So the guild buildings will now give their actual bonus, which in some cases may actually be only relatively minor now, but they'll give their actual bonus, but they will also then have a chance of giving your general or whoever you've got there a certain trait or a certain ancillary related to the guild, which is very, very cool. This feature is sort of in your versions of DaC at the moment, in that the health building line, which I think every nation does get a variant of. Let's check with Minister. Change over to the castle. Is it called health or is it called something else? I'm sure Gondor get it, but I can't see it. It's not the House of Kings. No, I can't see it. Maybe Gondor are ones that don't. Unless someone else is seeing it and I am just not. Town health, there it is. There we are, yes. Public fountains and then public baths. And they give a public health bonus and an order bonus due to happiness. But what many people do not know is that the health buildings give a very high chance of giving the general the trait or the ancillary doctor, which gives you a huge boost to the number of units you heal after a battle. Like, it is a substantial boost. It is arguably one of the best battle ancillaries you can get in the game. And so the health building line is really very useful. I think to get to the ancillary, you merely have to build the building and then leave someone in the town for a certain number of turns, and he will get it, providing he has the space. So it's a very, very useful ancillary, and it comes about from a building that doesn't seem that useful at first glance. So that's the point of this trait and ancillary overhaul, is to give more life to the buildings, but also give more life to the traits. We had so many that were just generic vanilla traits, and now we've added more that are useful. We've got rid of loads that are just garbage filler, and we've made quite a few more Lord of the Rings based ones. I say we, it is all Rohur, and to him we are incredibly grateful. But that is all of the stuff for the campaign map. So if you've got any questions, do pop them in the comments below, and I will get round to answer them. If you have suggestions and things, feel free to post them. But do note that changes that we make are not usually on a whim, unless they are really minor changes. Like me changing these hills, for example. I didn't ask anyone if I should do that, and it was then oh god, do you guys think this looks better? Most people were of no real opinion, it's just changing the map. So those kind of things are done on a whim, but major changes, like the twins losing their cavalry bodyguard, or the changes to the garrisons and things like that, they're all tested. We discuss them usually at length in the modding council first, and then in the beta council, which is just our fancy names for the modding team and the beta team, and then they are implemented, and then they are tested. And so if they are broken, overpowered, underpowered, if they don't achieve their goal, we make further amendments and changes. So do note that when you suggest things just sort of randomly, we're totally open to suggestions, and many of them have made it into the game. But do consider, well, I suppose it's not on your suggestions, but on your feedback. Do consider that these things have been tested. It isn't just, oh, I think that would be a good idea. So if you've got a question, do feel free to post it. There's something we maybe haven't thought of. But it is just to say we don't just do it out of the blue. Like, we're not just throwing things at the board and hoping something sticks. We do test the things. But if you have suggestions, you have feedback, do say, and we'll I'll reply and get round to that in due course. But let's jump over to the battle map, where we have a date with the Deeps again, for we need to see what he has become. So, welcome to the battle map, and of course the changes relate to Moria, but it is not specifically the Balrog we are here to see, but he is of course our main feature. So, I mentioned last time the Balrog had been amended, and he is now the officer of a unit of trolls. And there he is, with his casual reclined stance that he adopts at the start of the game, because his animation is totally not designed for this game, and it just looks really funny when he's standing still. But he has been given a unique troll unit, so as you can see, they are still trolls. They're not mythical beasts, they're not anything crazy. We are restricted by the limitations of the game engine, but they are now at least a uniquer looking troll. So they're not just standard cave trolls, they have some changes, some differences. You can see that some of them have got these sort of horned helmets, some of them have now got skulls on bits of cloth around their shoulders and things. They are just a sort of darker, broodier looking troll to go along with the Balrog. Now, something I foolishly forgot to implement, but the change isn't all that minor, but the unique general who is this fellow just here. So when the Balrog is actually in your game in the campaign map, he will be a general. This is a general's bodyguard unit. But of course, because of the limitations that the game has, the general has to actually be an orc-sized general. So when the Balrog, in inverted commas, dies, it'll be when this guy here dies. Oh, you can't see my cursor. The small gentleman in the screen now, when he dies, the Balrog you'll get your message saying the Balrog has died. And not when this guy has died. But that is where you have to just suspend your disbelief for a moment because we are limited by the game. But this fellow has been given a custom battle model, and you will see it in your games when you fight against the Balrog. We are looking to change up the Khazad-dûm script to make it now so that you always fight the Balrog. You will no longer get a choice. It will be, it will happen for all. Ah, look, they're not firing. Let's move them forward. So the Balrog will be in the campaign a bit more in future. The other change to Moria, which you can sort of tell, is that the Heavy Goblin Halberd, the elites of Moria, and the Heavy Goblin Infantry, they have been given the full unit size. They've lost 1 point of defense to counter this, and we're going to see how it plays out in real time. But in order to really hammer home the fact that Moria are the ultimate trash size faction, like throw everything they've got at it, we have then made their elites have the maximum possible unit size. Oh, I think we're going for it this time. Let's press delete. Let's get ready. Oh, we're in. Oh, that is horrifically inaccurate. What are you doing? Oh, dear, couldn't have been worse, could it? Oh, here we go. Here we go, everyone. The suspense. Oh, that one's burst too early. Oh, and so is that one. And they rain fire down on the enemy and do absolute sod all. But like 3 or 4 of those in a line would be quite good, wouldn't they? But anyway, so those are the only real changes to the battle map. The the heavy goblin archers and crossbows have also been increased in size, but not to the maximum, because maximum number of archers, no matter how weak they are, they still do horrifically large amounts of damage, and so they've only been increased slightly, whereas the ground troops now are as large as they can be. So those are the changes to Moria. So Moria is a bit more of an interesting faction. One thing I think I probably will do is make the Flame Wrangler just a little bit more accurate, because as you can see from here, we are missing almost all of these shots. But then when it does hit, it's just so destructive. Ah, they're coming! They're coming! So now we will end with a little bit more of a nice design. You'll see our poison arrows firing into the enemy there as well. But when it does hit, it does so much damage. It kills so many. Each one of those little fiery strands has the potential to just ruin an entire battalion if it hits well. And the poison arrows firing in there, lowering the morale of the enemy, of course. We'll send the Balrog in when they get near. I like the poison arrow design. I know it's a bit gamey to have that green streak, but I really like it. Oh, here we go. Oh, the front lines take a flame beating. Another set comes. Oh, that one blows up. Look at the damage it does if it doesn't explode in the air. It really is a powerful tool. Now, the only other downside to the Balrog while we're here, and because we're just going to wait for him to show you him firing against some units, is that unfortunately the Balrog does get knocked over by the trolls, and I don't know why, because he is considered a troll as well as the other trolls, but sometimes, not all the time, you'll note at the minute he's walking side by side, no trouble, but sometimes... Welcome back. So it crashed because, of course, I have not amended my Descript Projectiles file, and one of the Dwarven Axe Thrower units threw their axes as the Balrog hit the line, and it crashed the game. And I've just confirmed that while I was off screen in the interim there, so I'm going to have to rename my folder structure, because of course... well, not of course, but the mod build that we all edit into the Dropbox folder has the Descript Projectile set up so that it will work for the masses, for all of you. I, of course, have renamed my folder structures so that I can have 4 different versions of DaC running at once, and it means that for every time I copy the Dropbox folder into my own build, I then have to go in and manually rename the file line in order for the axe throwers not to crash. And I hadn't done that. So when the Dwarven Axe Throwers threw their axes, it crashed. So it wasn't actually anything to do with the Balrog, which was my first thought. But anyway, that was the end of the episode. I apologise it was cut a little short. But do put your comments and your feedback in the comments section below, or indeed on Discord, or preferably on Total War Centre, where we can comment individually on posts. But until we speak again, dear friends, Navarne den Perimad Melonin, and farewell.